John Marvolo smiled as he looked at the announcement that had just come across his desk. Folks, it is my very great honor to announce that the city of Cashmere will be setting up its Halloween decorations. You can expect to see the usual pumpkins, scarecrows, and even a ghost or two as you go about your daily lives. Long-time residents will know what this means, but for the newcomers, I'd like to officially welcome you to your first Halloween in Cashmere. You can expect all sorts of activities from now till the 31st. There will be concerts in the bandstand, carnivals at any of the 5 churches in the area, and of course, most businesses will be handing out candy on Halloween night. Another piece of paper rattled through the slot on his door, and he picked it up and chuckled as he read it over. Not to be outdone by the town, it would seem the Cashmere Botanical Gardens will be holding their yearly Halloween event. Come see what they've planned this year and be ready for a ghoulish presentation. I've been told that the park has been creating its own line of beverages and has put together several menus for those interested in trying their new offerings. We can also rely on the hard-working men and women of the park to put together a display worthy of the town and its people. The park and its representatives invite everyone to come and experience a Cashmere Gardens Halloween. And remember that locals get a 15% discount when they show their ID. That's going to take us back to the music, and I hope we'll see each other after this brief interlude. John muted his mic and put on Dream Girl as he sat back in his swivel chair. He loved Halloween. The costumes, the candy, the little kids running around who seemed to be having such a gosh darn good time. He loved it all. He'd have to be sure to rig up his mobile setup so that he could go out into the community and experience some of the yearly festivities again. He was sure that Charlie Guthrie would be performing in the park again this year, and he couldn't wait to have a piece of Mrs. Spencer's warm apple pie. It was going to be a good Halloween, as all Halloweens were in Cashmere, and John couldn't wait to tell everybody all about it. I think it's one of my favorite seasons to live in Cashmere. Dr. Winter smiled as she watched Juliet hang up the Halloween decorations in the clinic. She was never sure when it was too early to start decorating, but the second week of October seemed to be when they always put up their offerings to the season. Juliet would have probably put them up in August if Dr. Winters had let her. You had to be a little careful how early you put your decorations up in a place like this. Sometimes the sight of a skeleton or a bat hanging from the rafters set off people's less than fun childhood memories, and she was sure there would be a few people who would feel triggered in the waiting room until they took them down after the 31st. Dr. Winters was of the same mind as Juliet, however. She loved Halloween, and she would have gladly celebrated it every day if she could. "Any plans this year?" Pamela asked, as she handed her assistant a string of paper bats to attach to the ceiling. "Well, I was gonna hand out candy until about 7:30, get the little kids that walk up Main Street before I packed it in, and then I thought that Mr. Jones and I might go to the Botanical Gardens and see what they do this year for Halloween." Dr. Winters smiled, keeping most of the wrinkled nose out of her voice as she told Juliet that sounded nice. Juliet had really taken to the young man who worked for her brother, this magnificent Lucifer Jones. He seemed like a nice enough boy, very polite, very charming, any time he came to pick her up for lunch. But there was just something about him that Dr. Winters didn't particularly trust. She was certain it was his association with her ne'er-do-well brother, but perhaps it was a little bit of possessiveness for her assistant and friend. Juliet had been with her for a long time, someone she had helped out of a bad situation, and she really hoped that the young man wasn't the sort that would break her heart and then go about his business. Juliet deserved much better than that. What about you, Doc? What are your plans for Halloween this year? The usual. I thought that Maggie and I might go to the park and hear Charlie Guthrie sing a bit, and then perhaps make our way to the botanical gardens and see what all the fuss is about. Juliet grinned at her from atop her stepladder. You can always come with me and Mr. Jones, and heck, ask Mr. Seraph if he'd like to come as well. He really is a nice guy, once you get to know him. Despite her fondness for her brother's assistant, Juliet never seemed to be able to use his first name. It was always Mr. Jones, or sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, she would call him Marvelous, but she refused to use the name of that fallen angel in connection with someone she felt quite fond of. Dr. Winters often wondered what she would think of her if she realized her boss had a similar nature to that morning star, whose name she didn't quite seem brave enough to utter. I don't think so. There's a lot of bad blood between my brother and I don't think we will ever be on good enough terms to be anything but passably sociable to each other. Juliet looked as if she wanted to say more, but went back to hanging Halloween decorations instead. Pamela knew that Juliet had guessed that there was something very heavy between the siblings, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She probably assumed it was an inheritance squabble, or maybe a fight over land, or a spat from childhood. In her world, these were the things that separated siblings. She couldn't know of the betrayal her brother had been responsible for, of the betrayal her father had orchestrated, of her expulsion from the only place she had ever known, into a place she had not only never been to, but had been raised to fear. The bell clinked, and Dr. Winters looked up to see the writer as he walked in, already chewing his fingernails. Pamela looked at him with a mixture of pity and almost motherly love. Juliet couldn't have guessed why she saw this one so often. If she had, her questions would have been endless. Who am I? And when he asked it, it was the tremulous voice of a child. Come on. I don't have another client until 3. Let's see if we can't put your mind at ease once again. The two of them walked to the back, Dr. Winters with her arm around the man's shoulder, and Juliet watched them go with a sense of foreboding that seemed to be normal around that strange young man. Gramps, you don't think this is too many tombstones, do you? Marcus and his grandfather had been decorating the house since mid-September. Marcus always laughed at his grandpa when it came to his 2 favorite holidays. Grandpa would have probably set his Halloween display up in July if he didn't think the neighbors would call him crazy. Neighbors? What neighbors? Marcus often asked himself. Grandpa's neighbors were about 3 miles up the road and into the woods. He supposed that wasn't true. There were other houses nearby, but they were all hidden in the woods like assassins just waiting to spring out. Come October 31st, the local kids would congregate in his yard for candy and stories and the usual atmosphere that Grandpa provided. This was Marcus's 3rd Halloween living with his grandpa, and he had to say that it was one of the best years he'd ever had. He was engaged to the love of his life, his magic was growing daily, and for the first time, he actually felt like he might be making it. He'd been sort of a do-nothing before his parents had gently forced him to go live with his grandfather, and it was one of the better things they'd ever made him do. Marcus wholeheartedly believed he'd still be in his room playing Call of Duty and waiting for his savings to run out if he hadn't gone to live with the old man that had changed his life so much. Don't be silly, Sonny. There's no such thing as too many tombstones. Grandpa laughed, but it was cut short as he began to cough, and he turned away from Marcus as the cough rattled out of him like acorns in a hollow tree. Marcus hated that cough. It had persisted for a year now, and no amount of steroids or warm weather seemed to be able to dispel it. As the temperature dropped and snow became more than just a threat, Marcus wondered if there would be another Halloween with his favorite grandpa. The thought made him tear up a little. He loved the old man, loved him more than he did either of his parents, in fact, and the passing of his grandfather would likely shatter him more than anything ever had in his life. He looked at the gravestones, these lumpy styrofoam facades that they had painted gray and pushed into the ground with tent pegs. He hoped he wouldn't need a real one before long, but he doubted his grandfather would want to be put in the ground anyway. Grandpa would want to be in the woods, a place he had loved more than life itself since he was old enough to stand on his own 2 feet. Grandpa's coughing fit finally tapered out, and he headed for the porch where there was a box of Halloween decorations he had brought from Habitat for Humanity. The lady behind the counter had saved it for him, knowing that Grandpa loved new decorations for his ever-growing display. Marcus had talked him out of buying the box of Christmas decorations they had also set aside for him, but the woman had winked at Grandpa and said that she'd save them for him for as long as she could. Marcus's shoulders already ached at the thought of pulling the Christmas decorations out of the attic and setting them up before the Thanksgiving turkey was even hot in the oven. Halloween and Christmas were the only 2 holidays that really mattered to his grandpa, and he was known throughout the hills and hollers for his displays and for his offerings. "Let's get these bats up, son," Grandpa said, hauling out a string of plastic bats with little blinking lights in their heads. "More bats? You've got a squadron up already." Grandpa smiled as he watched the lights blink on and off in their little plastic noggins. "A cauldron." Marcus got up on his toes as he tried to look into the box, its position on the top step making it hard to tell what was inside. "That box looks a little small for a cauldron, but I guess anything is possible." No. A group of bats is called a cauldron, not a squadron. And anyway, I could never have too many bats. They're good for keeping the bugs at bay." Marcus shrugged. It seemed he just couldn't win with the old man. Grandpa was a wealth of information, some of it important, some of it just trivia. He ended up hanging the bats, putting up a few more scarecrows, and even assembling a Frankenstein's monster that Grandpa had gotten from God only knew where. He was careful to give the new bottle tree a very wide berth as he went about setting up. Marcus thought he'd probably go for the rest of his life without interacting with another bottle tree, and it would still be far too soon. "I think we need a few more pumpkins on the front porch," Grandpa said, though he was now seated in his rocker on the front porch instead of straw bossing in the yard. There was a beer in his hand, and there was another one sitting on the table beside him. The invitation was pretty clear. Marcus had worked up enough of a sweat that something cool would be just what the doctor ordered. Marcus took a step forward, meaning to crack it open and have a sip, but he sighed as he went to the cooler and grabbed 2 bottles of water instead. "You need to stay hydrated, Gramps. You know your doctor says that's the only way you're going to get rid of that cough." "Cough? What cough?" Grandpa asked, but he ruined it by loosing a rattling cough, which he drowned with another sip of beer. "Oh, that's just my hay fever acting up. It happens every year. No need to worry yourself or any doctor about it." Marcus nodded, but he opened the water and put it down in front of Grandpa nonetheless. "Besides, we carved all the pumpkins yesterday, unless you've managed to acquire some more." Grandpa's grin was as big as one of the jack-o'-lanterns on the step as he pushed a few more of them from behind the chair he was sitting in. Marcus chuckled. "Just where did all these come from?" "An old man of the woods has to have his secrets, son. Now, are you gonna carve those pumpkins, or are you just gonna jackjaw about it?" Marcus went inside to get a pair of carving knives. It appeared that the 12 or so pumpkins that he had carved over the last 2 days just weren't going to be enough this year. At this rate, he might get done cleaning the pumpkin guts out from under his fingernails by New Year's. "How are the festivities proceeding?" They were all seated around the big table again, Sam and Randy, the lady, Tobias, August, and the Barker. The Barker sat beside Randy, and Tobias and August gave him an empty chair between them. The distrust for the Barker had not lessened in the least bit, but some of them were beginning to come around. Tobias and August were extremely paranoid about his presence, but some of the Brandylow in the park had begun to accept him just a little bit. Brandylow were jolly creatures by nature, and it was hard for them to hold a grudge for very long. Some of them, the grizzled ones who had gone out to help find the lady and fought beside the Barker, had helped him with his haunted house, but most of them still looked on him with distrust. "Randy, what's the status of our security?" "Security has been stepped up. I have confiscated most of the automatic weapons from our new guests and given them the standard security baton and flashlight. I've explained to them that their weapons can be acquired again if they need them, but that civilians don't usually take kindly to people with automatic rifles patrolling the park. I do not foresee any sort of security issues with the upcoming event. Most of these guys have served in one military or another, and they know how to take orders." "Excellent. Tobias, how was the setup for the agricultural area proceeding?" The lady usually oversaw both areas of the park when it came to events, but this year she'd been talked into letting Tobias handle the agricultural area, while she handled the more fantastical side of things. Her side had a spooky wood and a witch's house, a candy forest, and some grisly-looking candy corn creatures that would chase guests if they got too close. There would be costumed Brandylow in the haunted forest as well to scare people. There would be witch's brew served and finger foods made up to look like body parts. It would be fun and spooky, and the lady had spoken endlessly to Sam about her plans for Christmas as well. It goes well. We've set up the corn maze and put up some scarecrows. The Gordlings are coming along very nicely, and we have hay rides that will run every 30 minutes around the cornfield. There will also be pumpkin carving contests, which led to an odd sound from the Gordling that was sitting in the lady's lap, scarecrow stuffing contests, and even a spooky barn that will be fine for kids of all ages. The lady looked pleased, but the two sides might as well have been warring nations as far as Sam was concerned. The sticking point always seemed to come back to the Barker. The Barker had set up his haunted house on the edge of the candy forest, and though it was small, he assured everyone that it would be something to be experienced. It was supposed to be at the back corner of the agricultural area, but Tobias had put his hoof down and said that he wanted the man nowhere near his side of things. "He is untrustworthy, and I refuse to turn a blind eye and let him stab us in the back again," Tobias said to Sam when they were talking. "Tobias, be reasonable. The lady trusts him, and that's all we need concern ourselves with. You told me once that my own feelings on something didn't matter, as long as the lady was safe and her orders were followed." Tobias turned and glowered at him, not liking having his words thrown back in his face. "Yes, but you have never endangered the safety of the park, or, more importantly, of our mistress. He helped them kidnap her. They tortured her and attempted to get her to give up her power. And if you hadn't come to get her, they would have killed her right there. Or worse, they would have trapped her away, and we wouldn't have seen her for gods only know how long. I know this whole Brandylow thing is rather new to you, but I've been doing it for several hundred years. I'm not in a hurry to return to the times when I lived in the uncertainty that was the lady's absence. Trust me when I say, you wouldn't want to either." That was when they decided they would put the haunted house closer to the entrance and keep him well away from Tobias. "August, how goes the concession stand?" August began to prattle on about the new food at the concession area and how everything would be ready on time, and about the new offerings they had for the homemade beverages, but Sam found that he couldn't take his eyes off Tobias. The old goat was staring daggers at the Barker, who seemed to be doing his best to ignore him. Some of the Brandylow didn't trust him, but Tobias seemed to hate the man. The look he was giving the suited gentleman was like something worn by a slighted and jaded lover, and Sam hoped that he would get over it. He was suddenly very sure that he never would. Sam had felt for a while that things were brewing, and he hoped it wouldn't disrupt the general peacefulness of the park. "Barker, how goes your haunted house?" The Barker smiled at her. "Very well. I think it will be a huge success for all who attend. I hope it will help people as much as it has in times past." Tobias rolled his eyes, but Sam thought he might be the only one to notice. "Excellent. It sounds as if everything is going well. We will officially begin the event on Monday. All of you should be ready to unveil your displays by then, so take the rest of the day to make sure everything is in order. Randy, make sure the security team is briefed on how to deal with guests. We don't want another incident like the one we had a few weeks ago." Randy turned a little red, but Sam could commiserate. It hadn't really been the security team's fault. The man had been drunk and belligerent, and they had really just been doing their job. The man had had a little too much to drink at one of the concession stands, the workers not understanding the wisdom of cutting him off before he got too sloshed, and he had wandered into one of the displays to touch the plants. Thankfully, it hadn't been one of the poisonous displays, but he'd thrown up on some flowers and trampled over a lot of the ladies' work. When the security team had come to get him, he had started trying to fight them. The brandy-low he was fighting had likely put men twice his size off, and when one of them had wrenched his arm behind his back, it had dislocated. The man had started screaming, but the security team had escorted him to the gate and pushed him out onto the sidewalk, telling him he was banned before refusing to let him re-enter. Some of the other guests had called an ambulance as the man lay there shrieking on the sidewalk, and it was a wonder they hadn't been sued yet. Maybe he had sobered up and thought better of it, but Sam honestly doubted it. That will conclude today's meeting. Everyone be ready for the unveiling on Monday. You're all dismissed. All of them got up, but the lady put a hand on Sam's, and he stayed as everyone else shuffled out. "Have you heard anything from the court?" Sam shook his head. "Not since we came back. The fairies move at their own speed. You know that better than anyone, and it seems that both courts are keeping us out of whatever business they have going on, if they have business going on." The lady sighed. "The courts always have business going on. We will need to be on our toes. If they mean to start trouble, then the last thing we want is to involve a bunch of mortals in it. Keep your ear to the ground and let me know if you hear anything." Sam bowed and took his leave. He would need to move around amongst the others and make sure their efforts were in order. This would be the first event of the season, and he wanted everything to go off without a hitch. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, then please feel free to click on one of the videos we have up here. Maybe look at one of the playlists if you're trying to get caught up. I know, there's so many videos on the channel. There's so many series that are going at the same time. Sometimes you just need a little refresher course, and I gotta say, I always enjoy the views. If you're not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit the bell so you don't miss anything. We upload a lot on this channel, so you won't want to miss a single story as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the Amazon link down there. There's quite a few books in my Amazon account. You can have a look, and if you'd like a signed copy, get up with me through email, and I'll be happy to work something out with you. Also, there's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member on the channel if you'd like your spooky a little bit early. Patrons and members on the $5 tier get their videos 12 hours early. That's in the morning, as opposed to in the evening. Patrons at the $10 level also get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one. Speaking of my patrons, you should see them appearing right now. Just wanted to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you. Patrons, subscribers, however you give to the channel. I really appreciate everything you do, and it truly touches me that you have chosen to support the channel in this way. Well, that's enough for now. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.